It happened during autumn break when I was staying at my grandmother's house in the countryside. Her house was small, made of old wood, standing at the edge of the forest. Nights there were always darker than in the city. No streetlights, no traffic, just silence, the creaking of the old house, and the sound of trees moving in the wind. That night, I had trouble sleeping. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, when I heard it. 3 distinct knocks on the window. At first, I thought it must be a branch, but the knocks were too steady, too deliberate. I pulled the blanket tighter around me, my heart pounding. I told myself not to look, but curiosity won. Slowly, I turned my head toward the window, and that's when I saw him. A tall figure stood outside, his face pressed close to the glass. The moonlight revealed his pale skin and empty eyes that seemed to stare right into me. He wasn't moving, just standing there, watching. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. Finally, I forced myself to yell for my grandmother. She rushed in, and when I pointed at the window, he was gone. She frowned, but there was no surprise in her eyes. "Don't look at him," she whispered. "He comes back every autumn." Her words froze me. What did she mean? Every autumn? I didn't want to ask. I didn't want to know. I tried to convince myself it was my imagination, or maybe some stranger who wandered into the village. But the next night, I woke up again. This time, the sound wasn't knocking. It was breathing. Slow, heavy breaths against the glass. I stayed frozen, my back to the window, until the urge to look became unbearable. When I finally turned, he was there again. Closer this time, his long hand resting flat against the glass. His eyes locked with mine. And though he didn't move his lips, I felt as if he was smiling. I bolted out of bed, screaming for my grandmother. When we returned, the window was empty, but on the glass, clear as day, was a foggy handprint. The next morning, my grandmother sat me down. Her voice was low, serious. "Years ago, a man drowned in the swamp near here. Since then, every autumn, he comes looking, maybe for someone to take back with him. I left the village as soon as vacation ended. I've never gone back to that house. But every autumn, when the nights grow longer, I can't shake the feeling that if I look out my window, he'll be there." I lived in a private house with my parents, on the edge of town. That autumn was cold and rainy, and in the evenings I was often home alone. My parents worked late, and I usually spent time on my computer or scrolling through my phone. Nothing unusual, until one Friday night. It was already dark, and I was wearing headphones when I heard a dull knock. At first, I thought I imagined it. Maybe a neighbor slammed a door. But then it came again. Knock, knock, knock. And the sound was definitely from our porch. I took off my headphones and went to the window. The front door was closed, but under the dim glow of the streetlight, I saw a figure. Someone was standing completely still, right at our door. He wore a long black coat with a hood that covered his face. I froze. Nobody ever came to us that late. I waited for him to ring the bell or say something, but he just stood there. Then again, knock, knock, knock. Louder this time. I stepped back and grabbed my phone. I called my mom. She told me not to open the door and to call the police. But while I was on the phone, the knocking suddenly stopped. I looked again. The porch was empty. Thinking the man had left, I turned off the lights and went to bed. But about an hour later, I heard a new sound. This time, it wasn't from the door. Someone was knocking on my bedroom window. Slow, rhythmic, intentional. I nearly screamed. I didn't dare pull up the curtains, but even through the fabric, I could see a silhouette, someone leaning close to the glass. He was whispering something, but I couldn't make out the words. I called my mom again, but just then, the knocking stopped. When I finally found the courage to peek outside, the figure was gone. Only wet marks on the glass remained, like someone had pressed their palm against it. The police arrived about 30 minutes later. They searched the yard and the street but found no one. They said it might have been a prank, but I know what I saw. It was a grown man, and the way he stared through the window, it was as if he was waiting for me to make the first move and open it. For weeks after that night, I slept with the lights on, and even now, years later, whenever I hear a knock on a door or a window in autumn, a chill runs through me. I never thought of myself as a coward. For the longest time, I believed all those stories about people seeing someone outside were just urban legends or coincidences. But one autumn, I learned the truth. The scariest thing isn't what's inside your house. It's what waits for you outside, watching. I was in high school at the time, preparing for a big literature exam. My parents had gone out of town to visit relatives, so I was left home alone. It was Sunday evening. Rain had been hammering the roof for hours, and I sat at my desk by the window, studying under the warm glow of my lamp. That's when I noticed something odd. The lamplight reflected in the glass, but in the blur of reflections, I thought I saw a figure. Dark, tall, like someone standing in the yard just below my window. I leaned closer, but the yard was empty. I shook it off as a trick of the light, maybe from being tired. 10 minutes later, I heard it. At first soft, like raindrops falling against the pane, then clearer. Tap, tap, tap. Someone was knocking, not loud, not forceful, but steady, as if they wanted to make sure I heard. I froze, my heart pounded, palms sweating. I told myself, it's a branch. But there were no trees near my window. I forced myself to check. I pulled back the curtain and saw him. At first, I thought it might be a neighbor, but the figure was too tall. His face was hidden beneath a hood, arms hanging limply at his sides, motionless. He stood almost flush against the glass, staring up at me. In the glow of the streetlight, I could see the faint reflection of his eyes, cold, shining. I stumbled back with a shout, but when I dared to look again, he was gone. The yard was empty, soaked with rain. I pulled the curtains tight, locked the window, and tried to convince myself I'd imagined it. But deep inside, I knew what I saw was real. Around midnight, I turned off the lights and climbed into bed. The rain had stopped, and the house was unnervingly silent. I had just started to drift off when I heard footsteps. Outside, crunching softly on the gravel by the porch. Slow, heavy. I held my breath. The steps stopped. Then tap, tap. Again, this time at a different window. Gathering what little courage I had, I crept down the hallway. At the kitchen window, I parted the curtain just an inch. The figure was there, standing close. I still couldn't see a face, only that suffocating presence. Then he lifted a hand and dragged his fingers slowly across the glass, leaving wet streaks behind. I bolted back to my room, locked the door, and grabbed my phone. I called my dad. He said it was probably some drunk passerby, told me to call the police. But before I could, the call dropped. My phone died. The screen went black, even though the battery had been full. I sat in the dark, listening as the footsteps circled the house. Every so often, he would stop by a window, just standing, just waiting. It went on for what felt like an hour. I was too afraid to move. Finally, silence. I didn't look outside until daylight, and when I did, I saw them. Muddy footprints. They circled the house. The last set of prints stopped right beneath my window. When my parents came back, I told them everything. My father checked the locks and said it was probably an attempted burglary. But I knew better. That man never tried to break in. He didn't want inside. He just wanted to watch. It's been years since that night. But every autumn, when I hear knocking on a window or footsteps outside, that same cold fear creeps back. Because I know the night watcher is still out there, waiting